thank you all for having me. Can we say thank you to GreenMellen? This has been awesome, hasn't it? All right, guys, I recognize I'm the thing between you and the door, so I'm going to do my best to make sure this stays fun and active and interactive to the best that I can. I want to say thank you to you guys. It really is an honor to be here with you guys today. My name is Michael Caldwell. I'm the 31st mayor of the city of Woodstock, Georgia. I got to spend 8 years in the state legislature before that. This is way more fun. I am also the vice chairman of the Atlanta Regional Commission. We'll talk a little bit about that in a while. And I'm the governor's appointee on the Georgia Technology Authority, which means I get to sit with 11 other nerds and we set all the enterprise IT data policy and data sales policy for all the state departments and agencies. So my city actually just last year won an award for being one of the most one of the top 25 most technology forward cities in the world last year. I got to go out to Taiwan and speak about AI in the public sector and how it's going to impact all of the services that you enjoy or don't enjoy. And so I get to spend a lot of time in technology. I'm not a marketer, I'm a technologist by trade. On the private sector side, I own Black Airplane. We're a full service custom web and mobile application development shop. We do a lot of work for many of the largest companies on earth, a lot of the Fortune 500 here in Metro Atlanta. We'd love to work for you, so call anytime. But at Black Airplane, we were the first Stripe certified developers in the world. So Stripe, the e-commerce giant, when they went to go set up their partnership program, we helped them set up the structure for that program. And in response to that, they invited me to come out to the Bay for their first Stripe Sessions conference. And I went, absolutely not, I'm not flying to the Bay for some dumb conference. And then it became obvious, I realized I might want to rethink that, because at the time they had this, a guy who was still a relatively unknown CEO. I realized I didn't have my clicker. Relatively unknown CEO, Sam Altman at OpenAI, was one of the first investors at Stripe, and he was going to do a fireside chat at this conference. And he had just launched GPT-4 like 2 months before. And so we'd all been playing with 3.5. We all knew that although it hallucinated all the time and was terrible, this is actually interesting. It might one day be good enough to do something, right? And so I thought, you know what? What would I give to go back and watch Steve Jobs speak 3 months after he launched the iPhone, right? So, all right, fine. I get on a plane, I fly out to the Bay. The whole way on the plane, I'm going, God, I hope this is worth it. And it did not disappoint. The guy was well, whatever you think about the guy, it was interesting. And so fascinating takes right as this new product is launched. It's being adopted around the world. It's one of the fastest adopted technologies in human history. But the thing that really blew my mind during the talk was the moderator sat back and he said, Sam, does OpenAI think that you guys will ever actually achieve AGI? Now, it's artificial general intelligence. Obviously, we all nod about that now because we know what that means. But back then, only nerds knew what AGI was, right? Nobody was talking about that or what pace we were on for it or what it looked like. And he said, you know, the problem with that is that there's no cohesive definition. We don't know what that means, right? And so we've used the Turing test for years. The Turing test, will a human recognize that they're interacting with an artificial person or not? If we achieve that, then we've achieved AGI. Obviously, that's not the test because we have blown that out of the water now. Half the time that you think you're talking to a person now, you're actually talking to a machine and you don't realize it. We haven't achieved AGI. So he said, at OpenAI, we're redefining that. So the way that OpenAI defines that is AGI will be a series of systems that dramatically increases scientific progress. We all kind of got quiet and went, okay, that's interesting. He has since used the phrasing exponentially increase the pace of human scientific advancement, which if you think about what exponential increase in human scientific discovery would mean, we're talking about an unrecognizable world, right? So the room gets quiet and we all kind of sit there like, I gotta think about that for a minute. What does that look like? Moderator sits up a little taller and he goes, well, do you have a timeline on that? He goes, oh yeah, by the end of the decade. That was 2023. That's 7 years, right? Now, granted, Sam Altman has a reputation for aggressive statements and timelines, so let's own that. He's not quite Elon Musk, but he makes promises that may or may not happen, right? So we'll take a more conservative approach here. The CEO of Google says, absolutely not. There's no way we achieve AGI by 2030. It's going to be at least 2032 or 2033. Yeah, that's the right response there, right? So what we're arguing about here is not whether or not we're going to exponentially increase the pace of human scientific advancement. What we're arguing about is timeline. And whether you think these guys are right saying that My youngest daughter will either be in elementary school or high school when it happens, or let's say they're 200% wrong. And we're actually talking about a 15 to 20 year timeline. What we're really talking about is whether or not she's got her driver's license. We are talking about a time frame that if your businesses aren't taking it into account, you're not doing your job. We are talking about a dramatic and complete change in how businesses and governments and societies should be planning, because the world that we're planning for today is highly unlikely to look like the world that we're going to be actually inheriting, right? So when we talk about that and we try to figure out what that changes, we gotta actually think about how that would impact the world, right? So in my civic life, I told you I'm the mayor of Woodstock. I also get to serve as the vice chair of the Atlanta Regional Commission. Who has heard of the ARC in here before? All right. That's more than usual. For all of you who didn't raise your hand, don't worry, you're in good company. Nobody knows who we are. We know who you are. So the ARC is the most underrated government agency in North Georgia. ARC handles almost all the federal funding that comes in through the Metro Atlanta region. This is now the 6th largest metropolitan region in North America. We've got about $150 billion transportation plan that we manage. We've got $3 to $4 billion in capital allocation every year. If you drink clean water, if you benefit from Homeland Security, if you've seen an orange cone, you've interacted with the ARC here in Metro Atlanta. Among our responsibilities is future forecasting for population here in Metro Atlanta. So we have just completed our 2050 forecast. So 25 years from now, we forecast that we will have added another 2 million people, or the population of Nashville, to Metro Atlanta. Yeah, everybody do your really upset sigh for a second, right? Turns out the secret's out. It turns out all of us yelling at the top of our lungs, "We full," has not worked, right? People are still coming. They're coming to Atlanta. The secret's out, which is okay as long as we project that out and we plan for it, right? We have to do this kind of planning because we have to plan for things like transportation services and healthcare and housing and all of those things that you count on us to actually be thinking about in the background. So jumping up another 2 million people is interesting, and that's going to be difficult. But the question I asked during the planning process was, okay, well, how are we accounting for life expectancy extension in these numbers? Because if these leading CEOs are to be believed, that should be a component we're thinking about in the next 25 years, right? If we're going to see exponential increase in human scientific advancement, I got a pretty good feeling that's going to hit healthcare somewhere, right? And the answer was really simple. We're not at all. And if you look at the record, it makes sense, because in the last 10 years, we actually saw a slight reduction in life expectancy. We went from just over 80 in Metro Atlanta to just under 80 in Metro Atlanta. So all the models we're working off of are projecting the idea that life expectancy will not be a major contributor to population growth in the next 25 years, which is a fascinating and, I would argue, bold take. So let's look at how AI is already impacting healthcare. I want to take you to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, which is out in LA. It's one of the leading hospitals in the United States. In 2023, they put forward what they called the Holstrom study. So they realized, hey, you know what? We have all this ECG data, not new ECG data they were collecting, ECG data that they collect in standard practice of care for cardiac patients at the hospital. Well, what if we took that and took a 2023 model AI platform, and we trained on this, we self-trained on this data? What kind of things could we notice that our doctors are missing? And it turns out a lot. So what they discovered is that a 2023 AI model trained on this data was able to recognize patterns that were nearly certain prediction of whether or not someone would have a sudden cardiac death or not before it happened. Now, recognize 5% of total global deaths are sudden cardiac death. And it is almost entirely because we didn't defibrillate fast enough. So it's a response time problem. It's not actually the occurrence, it's that we can't get to you fast enough. Well, these tools are able to notice patterns that human beings cannot see, that doctors cannot recognize. That was 2023. So we're not talking about science fiction. We're not talking about some theoretical idea of what if we could get a heart attack predictor in. They're doing this now. And so the question then becomes, how fast until that starts being applied to wearables, right? So I'm wearing the Whoop fitness tracker. Everybody's got your weird anxiety creating data manufacturing machine of choice. Mine's Whoop. And they are now FDA cleared to provide medical grade ECG data. So when I use this to conduct an ECG, that data is FDA cleared as if my doctor had done it. Well, how long until these on my wrist will tell me days before I'm going to have a heart issue? If we could solve for half of sudden cardiac death situations in America, you dramatically improve life expectancy. Half of men in this country die of heart-related disease. This takes into no account what we're going to do with diabetes research or cancer research or any of the other leading causes of death. Just that one thing dramatically increases life expectancy, and we're not even planning around it, because how do you, right? And so we know that these things are going to change, but what happens in a society in which millions of people are coming already, and then no one matriculates out, that's the nicest way I can think to say that, no one matriculates out of the system like we expected, right? It changes the math. Suddenly now your senior services funding doesn't work anymore, right? Your transportation systems don't work. There's no housing. The healthcare system explodes. The things that scare me about this, guys, I'm not afraid of Terminator. I'm afraid of what happens when this works, right? What happens when we see so much success? There is no argument that you're going to be able to make to convince me that extending life expectancy is a bad thing, right? That's a success, except for the insane problems it's going to create, because we built a system around the idea that we have a pretty good feel for how long you're going to live, right? What happens to a pension fund when everyone stops dying? It is a really, really unique problem we're going to run into, and it's a problem that's created because of success. So we have got to get better at figuring out how we're going to manage prosperity. That's the calling of our time, is to recognize that the innovation curve and the adoption curve are widening and changing on us. And so we have to ask what's different about this, right? Because it's not just healthcare that this is going to hit, it's everything. It's going to hit your transportation systems, it's going to hit your businesses, it's going to hit your business models, right? What's different about this, though? Because America's not new to innovation. We're actually particularly good at it. In fact, we're entirely reliant on it. If not for the innovation economy, we wouldn't really have very much of an economy to speak to. What's different about this one? And the answer is really simple, it's the pace. So if we look over human history, you know, your fun human history icons here, in the 11th century, we invented the longbow. And it took until the 14th century for that invention in Wales to find its way into wide-scale military use by the British Army in France. 300 years from invention to actual implementation and adoption, right? For electricity, it took 50 years for electricity to find its way into 1 in 4 Americans' usage in this country. So 25% of Americans took 50 years to use, 25 years for television to make it into 1 of 4 households, 3 years for generative AI. So a technology that did not exist in 2020, it took 3 years for that to be daily used by more than a quarter of Americans. The pace of adoption is changing. Technology advances at an exponential pace. And exponential means that curve continues to rise. Humans can adopt at a linear scale. So that's the challenge we face today, and we face it at a steeper curve than any generation has ever faced it before us, and we're about to watch it go into a wild, wild hyperdrive. So, what we have to remember, because this is fear generating, okay? When we think about our business models, and we think about the challenges we face, and we think about the world we're raising our kids in, I've got 4 of them because I had to maximize the use of my minivan. We think about the world we're raising these kids in, it starts to generate fear, right? And you hear a lot of people talking about, what about my job? Am I going to be replaced? What does this look like? And we have to remember that every single revolution has required that we redefine value. The Industrial Revolution took us from artisans and it made us assembly line workers, right? The Information Revolution took us from laborers to knowledge workers. The AI Revolution is taking us from individual contributors to outcome managers. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, is what that looks like. Because we run into this collectively in the private sector all the time. I know you guys are already feeling artificial intelligence impact your businesses. I can tell you in my industry, it is constant. And just like every other dev shop on earth, 2 years ago, we went with everybody and went, oh my God, we'll just write everything using AI tools now and we'll never have to do any work. And so everybody in the space starts doing that, right? And you spin up these autonomous coding tools all around you and they start writing code, and what happens? You got a lot of spaghetti code that nobody actually ever wants to look at ever again, right? And this was the cry. This was the problem for every engineer, recognizing, crap, these things are faster and better in a lot of ways, and they're also really, really awful in a lot of ways, and how do I know? And so we watched our engineers spin on that over and over again. And then all of a sudden we had one guy it just started to click for. And all of a sudden he's got these tools that are spun up and running and coding in parallel with him, and he's writing better code faster than anybody else on the team, and his work product is better than everyone else's. And so I walked over to him and went, what the hell? How'd you do that? Like, what gives? And his answer was so simple, but it changed the way I think about these tools, because he said, yeah, I had to stop thinking about it like code I wrote and start thinking about it as code that I was responsible for having been written. So think about that, because the way I had to frame that in my head was, this is not a tool, it's more like a junior developer that works for you, okay? So the reason that's important, when you think about a carpenter and they pick up a drill and they put a screw into a piece of plywood, you would never say, hey, did you put that screw in the plywood or did the drill? Well, I used the drill, but I put it there, right? That's how we think of tools. It's actually your work product. But when you've got somebody who works for you and they're building something or they're writing code or they're writing, you think about that product in a different way and you ask different questions than you would if it was yours. So when it's my code base, I'm gonna be spot checking, I'm gonna look at different things, I'm gonna think about it as my product. But if it's a junior developer that's writing something that I'm responsible for, I'm more interested now in, hey, what's the problem you were trying to solve? What's the context you had to do that with? How'd you think about the problem? How'd you architect the problem? Let me look at the outcome and see if it matches what I would expect to see given those variables. You start thinking like a manager, right? And this is how everyone in the economy is going to have to start to think, because we're going to see a major workforce shift here, and we just got through one. So over the last several decades, we've gone from a career economy to a gig economy. In 1950, you had an average of 2 jobs in your entire career. It is now 12. Congratulations, whether you're W-2'd or 1099, you're in the gig economy. Congratulations, odds are very good. You're not gonna be doing what you're doing right now. Several years from now, you're probably not doing right now what you were doing several years ago. It took decades to make that transition in the American economy. This one will not take decades. What we're about to watch is a transition from individual contributor to outcome manager. The BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, will tell you that 90% of the workforce are individual contributors. You're writing code, you're writing, you're a laborer. These are people who are hands-on keyboard, hands-on product doing the work. 10% of the workforce engages in managerial activity. That ratio is ripe to flip in the next several years. And the reason for that, if you think about why, is that in an economy where artificial intelligence continues to get better and better, and that time to delivery shrinks, and the ability for me, if you think about the skill sets that make an individual contributor really valuable, right? Deep experience, technical proficiency, really, really good knowledge base are all things that with these tool sets, I can get to 80% of where you are in a very short period of time. Well, those stop being really valuable skill sets then, right? And this has been true, again, for every revolution we've gone through. We take valuable skill sets, we replace them with other valuable skill sets. What does become valuable in an economy driven that way? The same skill sets we train the 10% of our economy in management in already today. It's the ability to communicate and to first define a problem, clearly define a problem, communicate that problem and your desired solution, or you might say prompt now. More importantly, quickly assess whether or not the outcome was right without going through every line of it, right? Just like you would do for your junior developer, I'm not going through your code line by line. If I have to do that, I might as well write it myself. But I need to figure out a way that I can recognize, did you do it or not, and then come back and re-communicate, re-prompt for a better output. That is the same process whether you're dealing with a human agent or an artificial agent. It doesn't matter. And those skill sets are going to be invaluable in this new economy. The problem is 90% of American workers will never learn them in today's economy. We don't train it. There's no reason to. It's a soft skill set that only matters if you have people directly reporting to you. And so for all your employees that you're not teaching those kinds of skill sets, they're going to be significantly more and more irrelevant as this flip continues to happen. I want to illustrate this with a story. Anybody here know Caldwell, the company here in Atlanta? Okay, darling startup here in Atlanta, right? They've blown up all over the world now. Chief product officer is a good friend, and he heard me giving this talk, and he went, hey, I've actually got a story for you that shows this in action. Going, okay. He said, we had an SEO coordinator who, part of his job was preparing customer briefing books that would take weeks to pull together. And in his evenings and weekends, when artificial agent tools started to become more consumer available, he started playing in his evenings and weekends, and he started training 2 of them up to try to build those briefing books to the quality level he would expect to deliver to his manager. So he builds these up, and then he makes some conversational tools, and he actually names them because we humanize everything now, right? So he names these 2 tools, and he goes to his management, and they do a thing where they allow for their employees to present to the team something they've been working on. And so he says, hey, I want to show the company something I've been working on. Great. Stands up and he shows these agents off, and he shows off that, hey, these agents are actually working all the time, and they're building my brief books now, not in weeks, but in hours. And all of us, I think you probably collectively have the same feeling I did of like, did that guy just code his way out of his own job? Like, what are you doing? And the answer is the exact opposite happened. Leadership promoted him. He is the first guy at the company in company history to have a manager title without direct reports. Because as far as the company is concerned, he's got to. Because what he just did is set up the ability to actually drive better, faster results than they would have been able to drive if they'd had to hire 2 more people and put them under him. And he's doing it in a more effective, efficient way. And at lower overhead. That's an individual contributor who has taken off his hat and looked around and said, okay, what does the company actually care about? It turns out it's not the number of hours I put into this thing. It's the quality output and how fast I can drive the outcome. Every American employee is going to have to think like all of us do as entrepreneurs now. This is how we have to think, but it is not how 90% of American employees have to think, and they've never been trained to. This is the shift in the economy that's coming faster than we're going to be able to adopt. We are all becoming managers of intelligence. This is the job. It is no longer about doing the work. Don't misunderstand me. There's going to be a ton of work. There always is. We're human beings. We'll find a way. But it's about defining the work clearly. It's about finding the purpose, defining the value, defining the work, and then driving the outcome and assessing it. And so what do we do? Because I got a room full of leaders here. We're all business owners. We're going to have to figure out how this directly impacts my business model. I'm sure it impacts yours. What do we do about this? Well, lucky you, I came with ideas. So I've got 4 suggestions for you. I'm going to try to make them as tactical as I can, but the honest answer is we're all going to figure this out together. And like every great revolution, we're going to break some eggs as we go through it. But first and foremost, I think we need to focus on redefining roles. Wow, that font is so much smaller for you than I thought it was going to be. I'm sorry. We're going to have to redefine roles. We have to stop hiring people for what they do, and we need to start hiring people for what they can deliver. And when I say tactical, I mean let's get tactical for a second. Rewrite your job descriptions. I think the best, most successful organizations today are writing job descriptions centered around outcomes and not what they'll be doing. Because it turns out I do not actually care how many hours a developer spent building that thing. What I care about is will they drive the outcome and get that thing out. So your job description should say things more akin to 15% faster velocity than, or reduce bugs by half, not able to reduce bugs. Because you need to be looking for people who not only can drive outcomes, but are actually motivated by that, right? This is going to change the kind of people you hire in many ways. And it also drives you to measuring and speaking upfront in the job hiring process what they're accountable for. Because ultimately, when intelligence becomes abundant and time to delivery and time to discovery shrinks to effective 0, the only thing left to measure is impact. So we have to be building jobs and functions around impact, which takes us to measurement. We have to measure differently. So start replacing effort metrics with outcome metrics. So that means firms that are charging by the hour, that's probably not a long-term sustainable revenue operation, right? So start figuring out how you actually start charging for value yield instead. This has been the holy grail we've all talked about for years. We've always wanted to do it. The problem is now if you don't do it, you're about to be timed out of business. And look, I say all of this, and this sounds really easy to do, and then it's really hard to do, right? We're talking about business models. The challenge is we've built entire systems and social structures around the idea of input metrics. We measure hours, we measure tests passed, we measure meetings attended, and your biggest problem is that AI doesn't get tired, and it will ace every test you pass, and it does not care if you're in the meeting or not. We're going to have to change how we measure these things because it's not going to be value optional anymore. So in a city context, that would mean things like, I'm not asking the question how many potholes we filled anymore. I'm asking, did we improve traffic throughput? In a business context, in my agency, I'm not asking how many hours it took to deliver. I'm asking, did we deliver ahead of time, ahead of schedule, right? And so if we start measuring impact instead of input, we can succeed in this new environment. Third is upskill constantly. I know it's oversaid. I know we all hear it all the time, but what I want you to hear me say is I'm not telling you to go upskill your team. I'm telling you hire people who are consistently upskilling, because this is going to change faster than you think it is. And the challenge we're going to face is that, like with every revolution we've talked about, it changes the skill sets that are valuable. So when we went through the Industrial Revolution, artisanship stopped being craftsmanship, came secondary to process all of a sudden. And that was never true before then. Went through the Information Revolution, memorization became secondary to search. Mattered a lot less whether or not you knew and memorized it. Mattered a lot more, how can you find the answer? Tomorrow's economy is going to be completely and totally centered on adaptability. Are you able to pivot and drive the outcome fast? And if you're able to do that, you're going to succeed in tomorrow's economy. And then last, plan for success. I know that sounds cliche and silly, but this is a bet on you moment. Like, you've got to plan for the success, and that doesn't mean the cliche feel good and just bet on yourself. What I really mean is assume that all those things that you didn't think would actually work out are going to work out, and build a plan for them. We talk about, I always love the concept of failure setting, right? Like goal setting. I actually think get the inverse here. Start asking yourself, if I actually succeeded to that pace, what would happen to me? Economists call this the prosperity trap. What would happen if I fell into the prosperity trap? So like we described, life expectancy extension is a win, except for pension funds. Pension funds need to be asking the question, what would happen if people live 50 years longer than they're expected to do right now? Because if they're not planning around that, they're planning for failure. You need to start asking yourself, what would happen if I could deliver what I deliver today for my client in a quarter of the time? How would that affect my business? How would it change how I think about charging for what I do? How would it change how I think about the way I pitch to my clients? I'd encourage you to ask yourself, on any particular system in your business, if I needed to implement artificial intelligence tools to help augment this tomorrow, could my systems handle that, and could my people handle that? And if not, I would posit to you that in today's environment, that's not an innovation or technology problem, that's a leadership challenge. You've got to go figure that out. And so, the underlying question is, what happens if this works, right? What happens, and again, I get it. The AI hype is a real thing. It is a hype curve that we're on, and who knows where we're on it. The question we're not actually asking, though, is whether or not this is the future we're coming into. The question's when. And so if you tell me you think I'm nuts, and you think it's 50 years out, because if you think about 50 years ago, we were in 1975. 50 years from now, it's going to be 2075. I will promise you this, 2075 is going to look absolutely nothing like the world we see today. This is moving at an exponential pace. If it is that far out, this is still a problem for your kids, and I would posit it is not a problem for our children to solve, it's a problem for us to solve and hand them a world worth inheriting. If the leading CEOs of the leading technology companies, of the leading artificial intelligence technologies in the world are right, though, we're not talking about a problem for our children. We're talking about a problem we're going to be inheriting here in short order. So what does that mean? What do we do about it? I think ultimately all technological revolutions come down to one thing, and that is leadership. It's the leaders who inherit and deal with the problem. And the leaders who succeed in this era are not going to be the leaders who adopt it the fastest. It's the leaders who are going to understand why they're adopting it and what they're doing with it. I know Jeff spoke this morning about purpose and how important it is to find your purpose. I think that translates so tactically here in understanding every single thing you set out to accomplish. You are going to have a clearly defined outcome you're after. And the leaders who get that well and hire people who can execute on that well are going to be able to handle this in a way that no one else will. The failing future is not us drowning in failure. It's going to be us drowning in prosperity and abundance that we didn't plan for. Because prosperity sounds easy, but just like scarcity, you must plan for it or it will drown you. And so my calling to you guys today is recognize the world's about to change faster than we expect it will. We'll be frogs in boiling water, and we won't even notice until it's all different around us. But if we don't plan for it, The business models we rely on today are going to change fundamentally. If we plan for it, we get excited about it, and we drive the outcome, there is more waiting for us than we could ever have imagined possible. So I call all of us to be the leaders of the organizations who get ahead of it, plan for success, and get to enjoy more success than we ever thought we could. Thank you, guys.